Hello, and welcome back to Book Banter. Jackie Collins is quoted as saying, "The biggest critics of my books are people who never read them." Gill Paul is the international best-selling author of 13 novels, many of them reevaluating extraordinary 20th century women whom she believes have been marginalized or misjudged. Please welcome Jill to Book Banter.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so
Hello.
much for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. I am so excited to talk to you today about Scandalous Women because it is my all-time favorite novel of yours
Oh, great.
thus far.
Thank you.
So
That's really good to hear.
I should have asked you. I don't have a cover with me, and it is a beautiful, beautiful cover. And it should literally, readers would be grabbed by that. I love the color of the blue and the pink.
Cocktail.
So clever. It looks appetizing too, which which is helpful. But it is such a fantastic novel. And The Scandalous Women follows the very interesting lives of authors Jackie Collins and Jacqueline Susann. How did the original story come to be? It's so fascinating.
There was a reader who contacted me on Instagram, and she said that Manhattan Girls, my novel about Dorothy Parker, was her second favorite novel of all time. So I had to ask her, what's your first favorite novel? And she said Valley of the Dolls. And
Really?
to be honest, I had never read it. So I got a copy and I read it, and I thought, yeah, no, it's very pacey. It's a bit dated. It could use a lot of editing. It's very long. But I started thinking, I knew that Jacqueline Susann had an interesting life story with tragedy in it. But I always, with my book subjects, I'm trying to sell in the US and the UK as well.
Right.
And I started thinking about Jackie Collins, who was her first book, The World is Full of Married Men, came out in the UK 2 years after Valley of the Dolls. And I realized there were a lot of similarities in what had happened to the two of them when they published their books. So there was a story there that I wanted to write. I needed to somehow link them. And that's why I invented a character, Nancy, who works behind the scenes in the publishing industry, because I knew from the start I wanted to talk about the misogyny of the industry in that era. So having Nancy allowed me to follow that storyline as well. So I had the three characters, and I set them off to see what would happen.
Amazing three characters too, because they're all very strong and unique in their own way, which is a huge feat. So well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I mean, with Jacqueline and Jackie, I follow loosely the scaffolding of true historical fact, but I might tinker, if I tinker with it a bit, I'll confess in the author's afterward at the end.
Isn't that the best? The author note is the best. I love reading them.
Yeah. The get out of jail free card.
It really is. And sometimes history and fiction collide so beautifully. It's just, you want to, you swear you can hear the angels singing. And then sometimes,
great way of putting it. Yeah.
Doesn't at all. So it is stunning. These two women, this is what I loved about the novel so much, because you know who they are as individual authors, but when you actually have them side by side, embarking on similar journeys, they were instrumental in changing the book industry with their novels and their determination and their daily decision to do it their way. Like they knew what they wanted and they were going after it. What did you find that inspired you most about them as you dug into their history?
My starting point when I was thinking about writing about them was I went online and watched every single TV chat show I could find that they appeared on. That really was the first thing I did. I spent an entire evening watching dozens of these things, and they are incredible. They're feisty, they're articulate, they're very smart, whip smart, and particularly Jacqueline Susann, she doesn't suffer fools at all. She really stands up for herself, and any opposition, she just bats it down completely. Jackie Collins is a bit more charming and polite, but they were both so good. And I
American
think
versus English.
they both had a background in acting, that they're terrific on screen. So that was my starting point with both of them, in fact, and they were very inspiring. I thought, oh, these are women I would like to sit next to at a dinner party for sure.
Really? Yes.
And then I started reading, well, Jacqueline Susann's biographies and whatever I could find about Jackie Collins, and learning more about their lives, their backstories, if you will.
It's fascinating how much of their backstories were similar. That's quite.
They
I
had
mean,
a lot in common, you know, as well as being actresses. They both had tragedies behind them.
yeah.
Jacqueline Susann had a son who had been diagnosed with infantile autism, and he lived in an institution, which must have been incredibly hard for her, absolutely heartbreaking. She also had had a brush with breast cancer already before she wrote her first novel. And Jackie Collins had had a first marriage with a man who had bipolar disorder. So that was a very volatile and difficult marriage. So, I mean, you know, from a novelist's point of view, that gives me something to get my teeth into, get behind the characters, try to
Absolutely.
understand them a bit, and how that drove them as writers, drove them to succeed, because they were both incredibly ambitious and determined.
Yes. That's definitely comes across.
Yeah.
Definitely comes across in the novel. And, you know, I wouldn't have known that about them just from reading their books. Or if you had just relied on, you know, past public
Mm.
perception, I wouldn't have had those frames of context for them. So I really appreciated that, because they were a little bit before my time,
Yeah,
especially
me
for,
too.
you know, for reading that type of book way before my time. But they really paved the way, and I'm so glad you chose to highlight them, because I think as authors and as women, we owe them a great deal. They, I think they probably changed the publishing world in a lot of ways. But one of the things that struck me the most is their drive to go out and meet their readers.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that was actually a turning point in publishing, where, you know, the author events and the meet and greets and the book tours all came from.
Jacqueline Susann basically invented the book tour, and she had to, because if she'd relied on the critics alone, they were vile about her book, Valley of the Dolls. You know, the most disgusting book ever written, dirty book of the month, badly written. She wouldn't have sold a single copy if she'd just
That's
sat
it.
at home waiting for them. But instead, she kind of realized that women would like to read these pacey, aspirational novels about people with glamorous lives, perhaps, but facing real life problems like addiction, you
Yes.
know, like cheating men, whatever. And she made it so that you needn't be embarrassed to be holding a book like hers.
Yeah.
You know, it became a big talking point. I mean, it was so popular. Valley of the Dolls sold
Yeah.
31 million copies. It was a kind
That's
of badge of honor.
crazy.
You got in the conversation if you had your own copy. So
Oh,
it
that makes
was,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. And I think they got a lot of women reading that hadn't read before, that didn't have time to sit in the doctor's waiting room just reading the dusty old classics by boring white men with, you know, huge long metaphors and whatever. They wanted a quick read
Yes.
that they could pick up and then put down again when their kids came out of school, and then pick it up just before dinner, whatever, to fit in with their lives. And so I
Yeah.
think they created readers, they created a market for that kind of book, which went on to, you know, after her, there came along Judith Krantz, Danielle
Yeah.
Steele, Margaret
Yes.
Bradford, Nora Roberts, Shirley Conran in the UK. They
Yeah.
created a market for all these women.
Isn't that
And now
amazing?
Julie Cooper, whose Rivals has just come out. I don't know if you've got that over
I
there.
haven't I haven't
Phil.
seen that one.
Yeah.
It
But
it is quite stunning. Like they it's a movement all
mm,
on its own, and it's just so strong in women being women, but doing it specifically the way that we are,
yeah.
and not. And I think that's interesting. There's nothing like more condescending than somebody who is not of the same gender telling you how you should be.
Yeah. Oh,
So
no, absolutely. Yeah.
they really did. They just stepped up the game all around, and not just in publishing, but worldwide, because it became a
Mm,
phenomenon.
yeah,
It became something
absolutely.
that people talked about. And
Yeah.
do you think that there was an equal readership, men and women, out of curiosity's sake, or do you think it was primarily women?
don't know. I know that my dad used to read the Jackie Collins, and I would steal
Really?
his and flick through looking for the naughty bits.
You got to learn
Um,
things somewhere, right?
yeah, no, but it was an era when publishers were very male dominated still. There
Yeah.
were still literary upper class men who'd been
Mhm.
to Harvard or Yale or Princeton and looking for the classics. And so it was
Yes.
quite hard for them to recognize that there was that it was women that were reading books. Because in 1960, only 18% of books published were by women, and that gradually changed so that by 1970 it was a third of books, and now
Wow.
certainly in novels it's about 75% of novels are women
Yes.
now because 80% of readers are women. So
It-
they just, it really the publishing industry had to change to catch up with who was reading their books and what kind of books they wanted to read. And
that
the
is
two
absolutely
Jackies started it.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That insight, because I think the same thing continues to happen now.
Mm,
When you think about the Harry Potter series and what kind of a generation it got reading
yeah.
and bringing people back to books, and then there's just this infusion of that years, decades later, it's still going. Um, so it's such a service, really, because I mean, humanity is based around stories. you
Yeah.
know, we started in the caves writing stories and
Yeah.
communicating and things like that. So the modality with which we consume stories might change, but
Mm,
stories I'm pretty confident will be ever present.
mm. And the
So,
Harry Potter generation, the ones that read all the
yeah,
books as kids, they're still reading, I think. A
they
lot of them are
are.
reading romantasy or
Yeah.
crime, but so long as they're reading, that's great.
And that's what it's about, because as soon as you open your mind to a book, you open your mind to the world.
Yeah.
Like it's such a service, and I just love it. And that's why this book is so important. It's a crucial read for readers who are just delving into historical fiction, but it's also, I think that every author should read this book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I don't even know if it's historical. Is the 1960s historical? Is that,
It
I
is.
suppose,
It
yeah.
is. It's apparently, I read the stat just recently that and it made me sad because it makes me historic.
Oh,
um, anything 50 years ago
okay.
is considered historic now. I thought it
That's
was
me
60,
historic too.
right? I'm like, oh, well, it's great for time periods in writing, but
Yeah.
as an individual.
But if you
Time
read the list, if you can Google bestsellers of all time and, ignoring the Bible and the Quran,
Yes.
Charles Dickens is number one with Tale of Two Cities, strangely, not his
Oh,
best book, really.
interesting.
J.K. Rowling's up there. Jacqueline Susann, Valley of the Dolls, is right up there in the leaderboard.
Really?
Jackie Collins is a bit further down with Hollywood Wives, was her best.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah.
So they absolutely hold their own against, the top books. They're very interesting. I wrote an article
Yeah.
about this summer about the top books. A lot of nonfiction, the Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist,
Oh, yes.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Oh,
So a lot of
gosh.
inspirational books.
Yep.
But the two Jackies are up there amongst the best-selling books of all time.
And when you think about the time period between Dickens and Jackie
Yeah,
Collins,
I know. Yeah,
like he had a pretty good head start.
it did.
So that's impressive.
Mm,
Wow. It's nice to see it. It really is.
yeah.
I think as women, I think we need to support other women pushing boundaries and trying to aim for the ceiling and beyond, because it is. We're all in it together, all
Yeah.
of us, regardless of
I
gender.
think all my novels are about that. Women from different periods are pushing against the
Yes,
restrictions of being a woman in whatever age they happen to be in.
absolutely. Yes, and I think it's probably why I enjoy them so much, because I can get behind that. It's empowering, and this was a
Yeah,
super empowering read.
thank
Definitely,
you. Thank you.
it's so good. I can't say enough good things about it because it's just
Oh,
I'm still thinking about it, and I was reading it in August, so
well,
that's telling you something. And I may have to actually go back and read some of their novels to, really bring myself up to that full circle of understanding and where they came from, because their personal lives were very interesting to me. So I thought that was pretty good. So we probably may have already covered this, but they did put women in a position to be viewed as strong and capable, but also while remaining vulnerable, which is, I love that, because I think there's a real power in being vulnerable. There's a real empowerment.
Yes, I don't think you ever saw Jacqueline Susann on the TV screen vulnerable. She wouldn't show it at all. And both of them, they wore this kind of armor. I mean, this is another similarity between them. They look so alike in a way. They have the big hair, the eyeliner, the big eyelashes, big jewelry, and they both liked prints. I'm wearing a Jackie Collins print tonight.
I love it.
So Jacqueline Susann liked her Pucci prints, and Jackie Collins went for a leopard print. But you do see a bit more vulnerability in Jackie Collins when she's sitting being attacked on chat shows. There was one where the audience just absolutely went for her, and she flinches and manages to carry on and
really?
Answer their criticisms very intelligently. There's one show, it was on British television, where Barbara Cartland, the romantic novelist, was on a chat show with her, and the host, Terry Wogan, asked Barbara what she thought of Jackie's novels, and she said, well, I think they're disgusting, really. I think you're responsible for creating all the perverts in England. And Jackie, you can see this amazement going over her face, and she does manage to answer, but it must have been so hard. Oh my goodness, if I went out there on television and was attacked by somebody like that. But it happened to the two of them the whole time.
Wow.
I mean, Jacqueline Susann just hit straight back and got really personal with them as well, So, yeah, no, they're hilarious.
They did have to have a suit of armor, because they were like, we are so fortunate to be able to write a book, and there's a lot of readers who review well and lovely and intelligently, and then there's maybe readers who didn't quite understand where the book was coming from, or it's just not their cup of tea.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling like we are just sort of coming back to that era where people can be, now in Jackie and Jacqueline's position, they were right faced in front of it. And now we're seeing that kind of discussion happen from behind screens. So it's an interesting, and I don't think it's quite nearly as in your face as they had to go through, but they did need to put that armor on.
Well, they have to be incredibly resilient. I mean, I'm a bit of a coward. I would never go in and read 1-star reviews that anybody had left for me. I mean, goodness, why would I do that to myself?
Exactly. No, I try not to.
Any, but,
oh yeah, right. Everybody gets. Everybody does. It's funny, actually, because we had this a group of authors and I were chatting recently, and we had this common conversation about negative reviews, and it's the reviews aren't for the author. The reviews are for other readers.
Yeah.
And so it's I think you're smart not to, because it's not for us. We need to step back from it and go, we've written the book, and once we let it out into the world, it's no longer our book.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And people are entitled to their own opinions of it.
Absolutely. Sure. And no one book or one author will be everyone's cup of tea. It just doesn't work that way. So and I do think that reading opens your mind if you're open to it opening your mind. Yeah. That's the other side. You need two parts to that, right? So I think that's why I think books like this, shining a light on women who were pushing boundaries, and did so at a cost to themselves, a personal cost.
Yeah, very much so.
And they kept going. It actually is very empowering. I love that. And the most astounding thing is that they did this in the 1960s. So it's not necessarily known for workplace equality, or, if you're female, even safety.
Really not.
You were watching your back all the time. And I think that the thing that struck me in the novel that I was like, the protesters outside the bookstore for women's rights were against, and I'm trying to remember, was it Jacqueline Susann? I think it might have been.
Jackie Collins as well. Yeah,
As
no,
well?
I mean, feminism in the 1960s was very hard line and kind of anti-sex altogether. And women shouldn't wear lipstick, and why are we trying to please men? And whereas both the Jackies characters were having relationships with men, they were having sex with men, they were. So I think that was the main. But you know, they did have some lines that you know, if you keep your man happy, then he'll fall into line. You know, just things that the feminists couldn't get on board with, I guess. Too much sex.
Too much sex. And so then they just kind of ban them all together, which is interesting. So it's really that feminism changed. It morphed and shifted.
Feminism keeps changing the whole time. Yes, it always has.
Okay, that makes sense. Because that was where I was like, oh, that's interesting that they didn't see these women, you know, going out and doing what they wanted to do, what they felt compelled to do. But instead they ridiculed them for it. And I was like, that is something I wasn't aware of. And I love it when I find
it from everybody. They got it from feminists, they got it from other authors, they got it from the literary critics, all over the place, members of the public writing in to tell them that they would burn in hell, that kind of stuff. Yeah, too much.
And they're writing fiction.
I know.
I think that everybody forgets, but fiction means sometimes when they get into these situations.
Can't please all the people. Yeah.
You really can't, no. But I did love that storyline and that insight into it, because that opened my eyes to what that would have been like. That even originally I was thinking along, you know, male critics and, you know, a male dominated industry and things like that. But really it was them against the world, except for those readers.
More or less, apart from hundreds of readers, hundreds and thousands of readers that turned up to see them in bookstores, to meet them, to get their books signed, to chat. And, you know, that was lovely that they could work that way.
Absolutely. And they did such a great job of it. So I'm thank you to them for paving the way, really, because that's what they've done. It's pretty cool. So there is the third prominent character, which you mentioned earlier, Nancy, and she is such a delight. I really enjoyed following her journey through life, because it was kind of like a coming of age story for her, finding her footing. How did you go about creating Nancy's fictional character, and was she inspired by anybody?
Well, Nancy is the most biographical character I've ever written, because I, like Nancy, when I left college, I moved to the big city. In my case, I moved down from Scotland to London to get and started work in publishing. With me, it was art book publishing, not fiction.
Really?
But I was completely in at the deep end and just waiting, total imposter syndrome. You know, I hadn't a clue what I was doing and was waiting for somebody to find out and sack me straight away. But also it wasn't the 60s, I hasten to add, but it was a very misogynist era, way before Me Too. And I had very patronizing bosses. I had, you know, the office groper who would always have a feel as he went past you in the corridor. And I had authors who thought it was part of my job to sleep with them. So
wow.
Yeah. You know,
a day in the life.
Tanya, I can cope with that. And, I have ways and means. Yeah, but you know, it was, so I had a lot of material when I was writing Nancy. A lot of my own material.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That is really amazing and inspiring, because she honestly was my favorite part of the novel. So
I really enjoyed writing. I mean, I do have fictional characters in other novels. I've got a mixture of fictional and not, but it's harder in books like Jackie and Maria. When I wrote about Maria Callas and Jackie Kennedy, there's so much documented fact about them, so many biographies, that I didn't have any wiggle room at all. I had to just stick to the facts of their lives, but
I
there was
totally get
plenty of
that.
wiggle room, and I have this fictional character. It's great fun writing more fictional characters. I'm definitely doing more of that in
Are
future.
you? I love it. I think it's a really nice blend to have because of the contrast as well. It gives you, it sort of smooths out the edges of the harsh realities sometimes.
Yeah.
So you did a fantastic job because
Thank
I
you.
was.
And also Nancy was the tool in the book that had to link the two Jackies.
Yeah.
She had to introduce them, and she had to be a go-between.
Which is a brilliant use of her character.
Show us what it was like behind the scenes at the publishing company as well. And the way they
Exactly.
talked about and treated.
And then that's pretty fascinating to go back through time and see how things actually happened then. We take so much for granted now.
Well, we have
digital.
much more law to protect us now. And,
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. I like that.
these kind of men still exist. They're still out
Oh,
there.
yeah.
But,
Yes.
they end up in jail in a lot of cases. So
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I think that as women sort of come into their own individually, and it's not just as a generation, but as an age, you don't have the same voice at 18 as you do at 45,
yeah.
so we all, and I imagine the same is for men as well. They have to also learn to find themselves from between those ages and develop and learn from mistakes. We all make them.
Yeah.
So it's, all we can do is do better as we know better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of men in the story, I really liked the relationships with their husbands.
Yeah.
So the second husband of Jackie Collins. And did you find much research when it came to them? Because they were pretty prominent.
So Jacqueline Susann's husband, Irving, I did find a lot. Well, he wrote a biography of her after she died. So I've got his voice, his words, description of their life together. I do still get the impression that he was a bit of, that she kind of pushed him around a bit. I think she was the boss in the relationship.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the impression. Much less is available about Oscar Lerman, Jackie's second husband.
Okay.
But I think it was a real kind of, I think he absolutely adored the ground she walked on. Certainly that's what her daughter said there's a documentary made about her by Laura Ferry. It's called Lady Boss. It was available on Netflix, and I'd highly recommend it. But she has 3 daughters, and the first one isn't Oscar's daughter, but they all grew up with him as a father and absolutely adored him and said he just worshipped the ground that Jackie walked on. So that must have been nice.
That would be really nice.
Yeah. Always told her she was beautiful and
he just really understood her passion and wanted to be involved in her life. Yeah.
And he moved to LA with her when she was wanting to expand her career there. He was American originally. He opened He opened Tramp nightclub in London, and then when they went out to LA, they opened Tramp in LA as well. So
wow. Okay. I was trying to make the connection to when they circled back to North America. So that's okay.
Early 80s she moved there. So not a period I cover in the novel. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That's pretty cool. I like that actually, because it just when there's that little nugget of truth to the character of them, I love that.
Well, I had to imagine the husbands a bit more than I did the women, because there aren't biographies of them. Right. So I just had to take the few facts I had and try and round it out into a plausible kind of character.
Absolutely. They're definitely plausible. I believed it. So most of the bad press the 2 women received about their novels was from those who didn't think a woman had any business writing about sex, basically. So in the prologue, there is an interview with Barbara Walters. And this, let me tell you, readers, if you pick up this novel and even just go to your favorite online retailer and look at the first 10%, you will be buying the novel right away. Let me tell you, because I was hooked immediately. It had me at the first sentence. And now I just kind of need to know if it was real or if it was
Oh,
fictional.
yeah. No, I'm afraid that bit is fictional, but
Okay.
could have been real.
Wow. It was
Yeah.
so good.
Thank you, thank you. I'm probably a little bit unfair to Truman Capote in the novel. I'm sure he was much nicer than I make him out, but he did have this feud with Jacqueline Susann. I don't know whether they ever actually met, but they sniped at each
Oh,
other from different
really?
media, and so
Wow.
he was a bit of a woman hater in that sense. Do you know, a lot of the attacks on Jacqueline Susann were personal about her appearance, because she was an older woman, but well, she was late 40s and not, some spring chicken
Right.
bird, as the
Yeah.
phrase was at that time. And almost the men were attacking her, like, how dare she? She's not even attractive. How dare she write about sex? That was the undertone I
Wow.
felt. So they criticized. She got into a slanging match with John Simon, a literary critic on one TV show, when he said to her that she was sitting there smiling with her false teeth. And she said, my teeth are capped. They're not false. But then she said to him, I can tell your hair's not false because it's too thin to be false. And this is on live television, and they're
Oh my
just
gosh.
absolutely having a go at each other.
Oh my goodness. And to
Okay.
think that that was allowed
Yeah.
and it was permissible, because you
Yeah.
would think that it'd be more like something like that would happen today. I wouldn't think it would be happening back then, but isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
wow.
So I
A
was
threat.
kind of inspired by that with the scene that I wrote in the foreword. Yeah. I'm
It's
glad you liked
brilliant.
it. Thank
Oh,
you for
I
that.
totally loved it. It it not only gave you the vibe of the story to come, but it set the tone.
Mm.
And it kind of got the, the little hairs on the back of my neck rising. And I was
Ah,
like, wait a minute, hang on. Nobody should be
mhm.
talking to anybody like that.
Yeah.
So
But they
well
did. Yeah.
done. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
it's really interesting too, because it's um that kind of attack, a personal attack. How do you defend that? You're not even defending your work. So
I know.
it's like that's pretty
Defending your teeth. It's bonkers.
yeah, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I certainly, when I'm writing, it's a ponytail and sweatpants. So it's not glamorous by any stretch of
No,
the imagination.
no, no makeup and jewelry. No.
No, exactly. Those are scheduled days. Well, the sad thing is that both women, and this irony caught me. Both women passed away after a lengthy battle with breast cancer. And part of that coming together sort of reaffirmed the notion that cancers that affect the male population are much more heavily researched. And they have been all the way up until we're just having dialogue about it now. We're just starting to
Mhm.
have dialogue about menopause for women and research into
Yeah.
menopause and things like that. And so that it struck me as another sort of dual chord of a theme through the novel. Um, and when you were researching, did you come across any other similarities that really stuck out? That was like they had so many things that just
Yeah, no, absolutely. Their appearance, they were treated the same way by the media in America and in Britain. I think
both
they were very,
sides. Mm.
very similar characters. Yeah, the breast cancer was just a bizarre,
Yeah.
but it was killing a lot more women, obviously, in that era than it does now. Um,
Yes.
there
Thankfully.
have been huge
Thankfully,
advances
we've improved. Yes.
on that front, and also the treatment was brutal back when Jacqueline Suzanne was going through it. I mean, it was horrendous. It made you very ill, and burned you, and
Oh,
the
okay.
radiation.
The
Yeah.
radiation. Okay.
Mm.
Interesting. So it's even that just that level, it just takes it even deeper for the story to know what she did and how she did it with struggling with that kind of medical issue, and to know that they didn't tell anybody. It was
Mm.
stunning.
I
Absolutely.
know.
And
Well,
sad,
Jackie Collins didn't tell her sister Joan until a couple of weeks before she died, seemingly.
isn't
She
that
went
amazing?
She went on, there's a women's chat show called Loose Women, lunchtime show on the BBC, and Jackie Collins went on it 9 days before she died, and you can still get the footage online. And she looks very, very thin. She looks much thinner than you would remember her from pictures, but she was lively and witty as ever. And after that, she flew back home and died. And I thought, whoa, she just didn't stop right up
Did
till the
not
end.
stop. She did not stop. I actually watched that footage.
You've seen that one.
I did, yeah. Well, I started digging into more because
feeling so ill that day, and she was a show person. She just brought
yeah.
it out and managed it.
I would love to sit down and have dinner with them.
I know.
And just because of I have questions, like just the drive and the inner strength and just the determination. It's fantastic.
Now, I do know, because I worked in London publishing, I do know a few people that knew Jackie Collins. Sadly, I didn't meet her myself, but there's not one that has a bad word to say about her. None. You know, she was
really
charming, professional, generous, and totally reasonable to work with. So that's good.
Oh, wow. Isn't that lovely?
I don't know whether anybody would say the same about Jacqueline Susann. I doubt
a little
it.
bit more cutthroat. Two different approaches, and yet both of them were successful.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the personality and
Sure.
what life brought you up to that point. So that's interesting. Wow. It's honestly, this is my favorite novel of yours, which is saying a lot because you know how much I loved A Beautiful Rival.
Oh,
adored that. And Manhattan Girls. Am I getting the title right? Manhattan Girls.
Yeah.
That just was so reminiscent. I went to the Algonquin Hotel because you mentioned it in the novel, and I was like, I gotta go check this place out, and it was fascinating.
So. I went as well, yes, and they've changed the decor on the main bar now, but there's still that tiny little twisty staircase to get down to the ladies' room, to the the restrooms downstairs, and I could just imagine Dorothy Parker tottering down these in her high heels because she was tiny. She wore kind of heels. Oh, quite lethal, those heels, after you've had a couple of cocktails.
I couldn't imagine. I think I was wearing runners, and I was holding the banister.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way two people could pass here. It's so little and skinny, but very cool.
Absolutely.
And a great place to visit in New York.
Oh,
so yeah, that was a lot of fun. So this has been really good because they are I got such a great glimpse into the backdrop of publishing, and I came away with it with much more of appreciation for those that came before us and those that pushed those boundaries. And honestly, it just was such a fascinating read. I love reads where I'm enthralled by the story and want to know what happens to the people, but I've learned something along the way. Those are the best kind of books for me, and you nailed it. So
thank you so much. That's really, really kind.
Oh, so good. So good. So before we go, besides Scandalous Women, which everybody should be running out and buying already if you haven't, what should readers look for? What have you been reading lately that's been on your shelves that you're like must read this cozy season?
So I'll tell you what I'm reading right now. Dawn Tripp's book on Jackie Kennedy. It's just called Jackie. Now, I've written about Jackie Kennedy, and I've enjoyed other, Anne Mar's Jacqueline in Paris and Stephanie Thornton's, and They Called It Camelot. There's a lot of novels about Jackie Kennedy, but Dawn Tripp's is just amazing. It's kind of first person, inside Jackie's head. It's kind of episodic, beautifully written, just completely convincing. It's like reading her diary. I love it.
Oh, okay. I'm going to add that to my list.
Definitely recommend. I've also read an advanced proof of Renée Rosen's book about Barbie, and Let's Call Her Barbie. Is that it? Yes, about Ruth Handler, the woman who invented Barbie. And it's
Barbie,
story,
like
Barbie dolls. Yes.
Okay.
And it's the story of this extraordinary, driven businesswoman and how she persuades financiers to back her as she creates this doll that has never existed. little girls have
Yeah.
had baby dolls, but they've never
Mhm.
had a sort of grown woman doll that they can dress in
Oh my
women's
gosh.
clothes, and she makes that happen. And it's just so well
Really?
done. I really, really enjoyed that.
Oh, when's that one coming out?
That's coming out in January.
January. Okay, we'll have to
And
look
then if
for
I'm
that.
allowed to have 3 recommendations, the
Sure.
third one is a biography of Vivian Leigh that's just come out called Where Madness Lies, and it's by Lindsay Spence. And it's
Ooh.
focusing on her bipolar disorder. You can tell I'm quite interested in these things. And so it
Yeah.
starts as she's having a breakdown and her marriage with Laurence Olivier is falling
Mhm.
apart. And then it sort of goes forward from there, but with flashbacks. And it's really focusing on the way that women with mental health issues were treated in the 50s and 60s. And
Mm. Oh,
so that's
yeah.
fascinating to me.
Isn't it? It is
And what happened to
fascinating.
poor Scarlett O'Hara?
Oh, I know, right?
Mm,
Right? But even if you didn't even have to have a mental health issue, you could just find yourself in a family way and all of a sudden you're carted off to an institution.
yeah.
Like,
And I'm also really looking forward to reading your Hamilton Hotel series.
oh,
And I know you're publicizing your last one is just out, The Cocktails Before Midnight, which is a great title.
thank you. Do you know that was the hardest title I have ever had to
Was
come
it?
across? It was book 3 for
Mm,
that was what I called it, and I was coming down to the wire, and I was like, "Okay, this is ridiculous now," because I am now about to, finalize with my cover designer, and I'm still calling it book 3.
oh.
So
That wouldn't look so great on the cover.
book 3. Oh my gosh. So I actually sat down with the Oxford English Dictionary and actually, sorry, the Oxford Canadian Dictionary, because I didn't know we had one of those until just a couple years ago. And I went through the whole thing trying to figure it out because every title I came up with sounded like a murder mystery.
Mm.
And I was like, this isn't working. So then I pulled the first 2 books off my shelf, and the spines caught my attention, and I was
Mm.
like, "Oh, it's so cute. She's put a little key and a little clock, and, oh, well, this one could have a cocktail." And I went, "Oh."
Nice.
So sometimes you actually just need to go back to the beginning.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
So that was fun to once you have a title, then I feel like I can go forward.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes titles come and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And it's an important part of the book, right? So
It is. I quite often get my title changed by the publisher. I never get,
I
well,
bet.
sometimes I do, but quite often they change them. Scandalous Women wasn't mine. I can't
It
remember what I
wasn't.
called it actually. What did I call it?
Really?
I don't even remember what I called it. We went through so many lists. I think I
It's a
just called it the Two Jackies, knowing that somebody
yeah,
would come up with something better.
Scandalous Women's a great title. It's
Thank
catchy.
you.
It
Not
gets people's
mine.
attention.
Yeah.
It is good though. It is good. So I think that, yeah, I definitely think that that's definitely one that people should read. I have a top 3 for yours, so and, Beautiful Rivals is definitely one of them. That I love the history in that. So, so good. So,
Thank you.
I've so enjoyed your novels, and I can't wait to talk to you again about
Yeah.
another one coming
Thank
up.
you. Love to. Love to.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and until next time, friends, go grab Scandalous Women and settle in for a good read.
Thank
Bye.
you, Tanya. Bye bye.
Thank you.